What are the enforcement differences between IHL and human rights law? Imagine a world where rules are in place to protect people during peace and war. That's what international law tries to do, but it does so in different ways depending on the situation. Today, we're exploring how enforcement works differently for international humanitarian law and human rights law. International humanitarian law is mainly about rules during armed conflicts. It's designed to protect civilians, prisoners of war, and those not fighting. It limits the methods and means of warfare to reduce suffering. Human rights law applies all the time, whether there is peace or war. It protects basic rights like the right to life, freedom from torture, and freedom from arbitrary detention. These laws serve different purposes but often overlap in real-life situations. When it comes to enforcement, the differences are clear. For international humanitarian law, enforcement depends mostly on states. Countries are responsible for respecting these rules by passing laws, training their armies, and monitoring their own conduct. If violations happen, they are expected to investigate and prosecute offenders. International courts like the International Criminal Court can also hold individuals accountable for serious breaches. Organizations like the International Committee of the Red Cross play a role in monitoring compliance and encouraging respect for the rules. But since enforcement relies heavily on states, it can be inconsistent, especially if political interests get involved. Human rights law enforcement is more structured through international and regional bodies. The United Nations Human Rights Council and regional courts, like the European Court of Human Rights, investigate violations, issue reports, and sometimes impose sanctions. Countries are also expected to enforce these rights through their own courts and legal systems. This makes human rights law more accessible for individuals seeking justice, but enforcement can still be slow or limited if governments do not cooperate. In practical terms, enforcing international humanitarian law is often harder because there is no global authority with the power to enforce it directly. States are responsible, and their willingness to act depends on their interests. Human rights law, on the other hand, has more established international mechanisms that can sometimes intervene more effectively. Still, both systems face challenges, especially in conflict zones where violations are frequent. In the end, both laws aim to protect people, but they do so with different enforcement tools. International humanitarian law relies on states and international courts, while human rights law depends on international organizations and national courts. Understanding these enforcement differences helps us see how the rules work in real life and why cooperation is so important to protect civilians everywhere.